All right, everyone. So today we will be learning about the three levels of Claude. We have chat, cowork, and code. But before we dive into the depths of what Claude Code is, we want to really take a deep dive of how we even got here in the first place. And there's so much technical things being taught about how to use Claude Code, MCP here, API here, CLI that. There's so much technical things, and I just want to get down to the bottom of it first so that you have the right foundations of how to understand Claude Code. And this is for everyone who is just non-technical, who are creatives, who are just trying to understand this new thing, Claude Code. How can you be someone using Claude Code to your day-to-day things without even coding in the first place? And so let's start with the basics here. All right. So what I want to teach here is that there are three levels here. And once you start installing Claude right here, let me show you. And so when you install Claude right over here, we have chat, cowork, and code. Now there's three levels into this. And you might say, wait, some people when I see them using Claude Code, I could just see like massive terminals here and there. How do they actually do that? And so I'm going to teach you on that part later on, but I want to give you the foundations first. We're going to make it complex, but for us to understand the complexity, we need to go down to the foundation. So we all know what ChatGPT is. And if you're familiar, it's a chat bot, essentially, in its most basic sense. It's a conversational AI. Now, in essence, Claude is like that, but it has a better model. It has a better logical model. It reasons very well, it thinks very well, and has a very good memory of the things that you tell about it, and how it handles conversation. Now, cowork, on the other hand, since what the thing is with chat is it's pretty isolated. Essentially, it's just conversations. It's almost as if it's reactive. Once you prompt it with what you want to say, it just responds back. Now, with cowork, on the other hand, it's essentially using the same model, but imagine something wherein like this is the AI, right? And the only thing, the capability it could do before was to respond in messages. But now we gave it other aspects that it could respond into, which could be tools. And so now you gave them like a hand and a feet right over here to do something in a lot of things. And so now the agent right here could control your keyboard or control your Google Apps, could control your Google Calendar, your Gmail, and whatnot. And so there's so many things that can work on this. That's a funny drawing. But moving forward into that, cowork, on the other hand, is not just reactive, right? It's agentic. And what does agentic really mean? Agentic means that it is an agent, which means it's autonomous. Autonomous in what way? Autonomous in essence that you give it a goal, right? And the thing is with ChatGPT is that when you tell it something, it reacts and gives you the solution, and then after that it's done. It's basically the end of the line. But when you give something to an agent, it works autonomously until it achieves the goal. It just doesn't stop until it reaches the goal. It keeps looping and trying to understand how I can finish this. And if it gets blocked, the agent would ask you, hey, I'm being blocked by this constraint. Can you help me solve this? And so, in essence, we've moved out from just trying to be asking for consultation to a more of an executor. And so that's what cowork does. And so the difference between cowork and code is the technicalities of how this can expand. Because if cowork can already do that, what could Claude Code do? And is it only necessary to use Claude Code if you are a coder or a programmer? Not necessarily, because the thing is, you have chat, you had cowork, and code. Now, the whole thing about code is that it is accessing your CLI. Now, what is a CLI? All right, and a CLI means command line interface, which is essentially the terminal that we use to control our computer, right? When you do something with, sudo or whatever. Now, the point is, Richard, that's technical. What's a terminal for? Why can't we just use cowork? Yes, you can use cowork. There's just like so much things that you could do with code because you can access certain things inside. It's like another level. And once you understand this, even if you're non-technical, you are going to be in a very good place. And so let's try and uncover what is a CLI and how can we get to the depths of the levels here. So I want to get back to the theory of how we got to this point of technology. Okay. So before we got in here, right, we had what we call, before binary, even, we had like just on and off signals, right? We had electronics of on and off, right? And we were trying to understand, it's like, is this on? Is this off? And so we had no electronics of how to do logic until we got into binary. And binary, you might have gotten, like how a telegraph works. It works with binary, and so we were ascending in technology. Then we got into assembly language, which is binary, but a lot more human level, or as I would say, not ones and zeros, right? And then we got into high level programming. And so the thing is, high level programming is kind of like C or HTML or so C++. Well, HTML is a little bit on the bottom of the chain, like HTML, JS, or Python. Now, these are different languages, but essentially how this works is these are the levels of machine language. In truth of everything is that the machine language is all about just understanding binary. Okay. And so binary is ones and zeros, but in order for humans to understand, we have to use different languages, which is going to assembly, going to high level programming like C, C++, or C sharp. And so until it got into a point where we could understand it easily through HTML to JS to Python, until later on we have natural language, which I'm going to go here in a bit. Now, the next part here is that we have three levels here. And so levels of machine language, you already know that. Now we're moving on to how do we communicate with a computer. So we have three levels here. So CLUI, what is a CLUI? Before, since we were just using these languages, we were going to have to use commands to use the terminal. And so if you've been old enough and seen Windows, I don't know, Windows 98 or DOS, you pretty much have to use a terminal all the time in order to control a computer. That's how a computer works. Okay? Now, as time progressed, when Apple came and Windows came, GUI became the thing that made all the difference, because the only ones who could use terminals and in DOS was technical people. You had to learn the depths of how things work in order to use a computer before. Now, when you started using GUI, everybody, everybody, kids, mom and pops, could use a graphical user interface. That's what we use in a day-to-day. This is what Chrome is. This is what Mac is. This is what Windows is. This is what your phone, you see it with a graphical user interface. Then came a time, which is where we are right now. I don't know how else it would go even further with this, because it's almost unimaginable. Because now the thing is, we could control binary and machine language through natural language by just prompting with our voices, with our typing, and with the way that we think. We don't even have to memorize how things are. It's just almost intuitive. It's just the same as GUI, but now it's natural language. Now, why am I talking about a CLUI and a GUI? Because the thing is, a GUI has granular controls, yes, but the CLUI essentially has admin level of access, which means you could control your files through the command line. And that means if you are using Claude Code, your Claude Code has control over your whole computer, which means you could be creating files, you could be editing files, you could be creating certain things. Now, the thing is, co-work is powerful enough, yes, but code is in entirely a different level. Let me show you a use case, right? So one use case that I had before was like, okay, co-work has their own connectors, right? If you go to Claude right now, let me open Claude. If you open Claude right now on the co-work, you could go and check your connectors, and you could see connectors here, right? You could manage your connectors. Excuse me. And you got so much here. You could be adding like all these things, right? But the thing is, if you don't have, well, pretty much you have to do some technical things, but code could do that very, very well. So we have the CLI here, right? And the thing is, before I wanted to connect with Apple Notes. So Apple Notes, I told it, hey, what if I want to connect with Apple Notes? I want you to check my notes because I always use that, and give it a go on what most active or what current active notes I'm using, and get some context on that. And he said, oh, I don't have connection in Apple Notes. I was like, oh, okay. But he was saying that, or it was saying that, okay, but let me create one. And it started creating an Apple Notes connector. And a connector is essentially, now I'm going to get to a part here where you'll always hear this. We have API and we have MCP. All right. Now, an MCP only means Model Context Protocol. All right. Model Context Protocol. Right. Now, an API is Application Programming Interface. Okay. So now the thing is, initially I couldn't connect through Apple Notes. And the way that you can connect through Apple Notes is what you call an MCP. An MCP is essentially a connector to another app. Just like what I said, if it's agentic and you gave it tools, well, these connectors here are what you call MCPs, right? And an MCP is essentially a connector. And so what happened was, all right, I don't have a connector for Apple Notes, which is an MCP, so let me make one. And it starts making one. And once it started making one, I was surprised. It changed itself. All the files inside of its brain, when inside of the Claude folder, he rearranged it, created its own skill, how to access Apple Notes, where to find it, and then it just asked for approval from me. Now, it done that because it's agentic. You gave it a goal, which is to connect to Apple Notes, and it saw a constraint. It started creating a way to connect, which was through the MCP. Now, I did mention here API, which I left here. So MCP is something that we have, and we only had for when AI came, or at least it became popular when AI came, because we had N8N before. And so if you check out N8N, you had these things right here in connectors, and you could create MCPs. Now, the thing is, when you initially start with these connectors, essentially these are API, right? And API is just a way to connect certain apps. Now, there's a nuance between the two, but they're pretty much synonymous in essence. Like API is a connector, but MCP is more focused for AI in essence. Once you link up, let's just say when you receive a Gmail and it sends, once I receive it, triggers and puts it to Airtable, and then it merges it into a certain thing. So that's how API works. You're just trying to branch certain apps together. Now, the thing is with MCP is that yes, it does use the API, but it's more focused on AI trying to access the MCP. And so there's nuance into it, but in essence, that's how I would just put it on the technical side. And so now let's get back to what Claude Code can do. Is it just like, oh, creating Apple Notes? The thing is, there's so much things that you could do. I had a way of one of the use cases that you will keep hearing about this is that CLI means it can access all your folders, right? And so you have folders and files, which means you could ask it to organize itself and say, Claude, I think my desktop is messy. And can you organize it? And it will actually do it. It would ask you for permissions on how to access and when not to access. And so there's so much things that it can do. Another one with this Claude Code, which you could also do in Cowork, but one of the things I like is that you can install certain skill sets like access to browser with Playwright or other technical things that you can really hack things inside and customize it as if it's Jarvis. You have full control on what you want. You could control your house lights. Essentially, if you have a smart light and whatnot, you could control it to do certain things and write certain things. And so that is, in essence, the tree part. And we're going to go deeper into this. And so all of this is governed by what you call an LLM. And so you keep hearing about these LLM. What is an LLM? LLM in essence is basically just means large language model. And so an LLM is essentially a model that predicts language. In essence, it creates logic through language. And so we have all these models like ChatGPT 4.0, ChatGPT 3.5, 2.5, whatever, Codex, which is good for coding. All of these are essentially trained on specific content that created a model of thinking. Like, for example, ChatGPT 4.0 is conversations, very good at conversations, right? 3.5 is how we started using ChatGPT, although it had very small memory. 2.5, a little bit of the stupid one because it was still learning how to talk to us. And so there's so much things. And now ChatGPT Codex, it's one of the most powerful ones for coding as of right now. Anthropic, one of the best models when it comes to logic right now. We have Opus, which is the smartest one in the market right now. Sonnet is a day-to-day thing that you use, Haiku, and so much more. Google has Gemini. Google has Gemini Flash Pro, Nano Banana, and each of them, essentially, if you're teaching, different people, they have different responses into things. For example, you might just say, like, let me think of an example. You might say when you're talking to a military guy and just say attention, and suddenly the military guy stands up straight, right? Now if you say that to a kid and say attention, like, oh, what does this mean? Is he teaching me something? Like, they have different responses into things because they had different experiences, they had different perspectives. And so models like that have different training data. So they have different responses when they get into a prompt. And so the thing is, for example, Opus 4.6 is more logical. ChatGPT 4.0 is more conversational. It's more validating. It's more like a therapist when you talk to it. And I had that experience. Gemini is much greater at creating front end content because of how it was trained. Flash Pro and Nano Banana is good at generating images. And so all this are different models for AI. And so now, getting to the next part here, we're in. The thing is, now we are on the level of natural language. Now we need to be using proactive and agentic from the reactive and conversational. If we're gonna update from ChatGPT, this is what it is. Now we want to update from the proactive and agentic. When you say proactive, meaning it takes action on its own. Now you might have heard of OpenClaw. What is OpenClaw? OpenClaw is essentially just another tool set. It's a way for AI to have a lot of hands into the tools that you have inside of a computer. And the same thing, one model controls it. And so the model, it could be OpenAI, it could be Anthropic, it just controls everything. Now, same thing with how Claude Code works. This is the model. We have, let's say, Sonnet or Opus of Anthropic. You're giving it access to the terminal, which essentially gives you access to your whole computer. And so it has access over the web, it has access over your Google Calendar, your desktop. And so it's the same thing. And so this is what happens, and what we want to take advantage of as part of the workforce, or anyone who wants to take advantage as a non-technical person, is that to use this in our day-to-day jobs. Like, for example, if it's proactive, you could schedule certain things, like every 9 a.m. Every 9 a.m., the agent could talk to you and give you leads, and follow up your leads or whatnot, or do certain outbound. And so there's so much things that you could do when you're using proactive and agentic, because it's also an executioner versus just someone you would consult to as a therapist and just take action by yourself. And so imagine the difference if you are just using if you're just using chat and chat gpt versus someone who has and understand how these tools and can spawn all this AI to do the things for them. And the thing is with Claude Code is that Claude Code could run in parallel and could run in sub-agents. So what are these new terms? You keep hearing them again and again. And so this is Claude Code, right? And let's just say Claude Code lives in a terminal, right? And a terminal is a tool that a model could control. So this is a model, right? And so a model controls Claude Code with the terminal. And the thing is, it can spawn multiple sub agents. And so an agent in itself has a goal, right? If I have a goal to achieve something, which is to create an app, an app that does this feature. And I'm going to show you later on some examples on other parts. But the thing, I'm just giving you the theoretical part so that you have what it takes to understand the deeper complexities of how this works, because everybody's confused on what this is. And I just want to share to you, as someone who've gone into the trenches, to give it to someone who's non-technical or is just starting out. Now you have a goal, which is an agent has a goal. And then the thing is, again, what I said is that, multiple models or multiple AIs have different skill set and different ways to react. And so what will this agent do is that it will spawn what you call sub agents or little employees under it, right? And what it will do is that this agent will delegate work to other employees to do certain things. Like, let's just say, hey, let's just say he'll be the CEO. Let's say a CEO here, and then it will divide the work into three things. It could be marketing, right? Or it could be operations. It could be whatever thing like a CTO. And so that sub agent could also create parallel sub agents, which could create like a CTO would have, let's just a front end, right? And then you could have a back end, and then you could have someone who does QA. And so these are the sub agents, and you can train Claude Code to essentially have these agents and these sub agents to work. And the way that it works is through natural language. You don't have to script anything anymore. You just instruct it. And so let me show you so that at least now you understand how it works in essence of where it moves. And so what I'm going to be opening up is anti-gravity. And so don't get overwhelmed with what I'm about to show you. And so this essentially is a IDE, okay? And so IDE means interface development environment. And what it does is that essentially it's just a GUI on how you could manipulate your code. Before, if you're probably in elementary, your teacher probably asked you, or maybe high school, ask you, hey, write an HTML script, and you had to do it in Notepad or something similar. But essentially an IDE is just a way to edit code properly, right? And so if you're doing HTML, if you're doing JS, and so now we're gonna go into the IDE. This is anti-gravity, which is a clone of VS Code. And so if I search VS Code here, essentially it's just the code editor. And the thing is, Google cloned this into its own IDE because it has this agent on the side, which I will explain that in another video right here. And so you got the agent here controlling your code and whatnot. But this is an IDE, and I had it open Claude's brain, right? And Claude here has its own backups. It has its own skills. It has its own references. It has its all the things that it uses to function, right? So the thing is, you can be creating agents inside of here just like this. This is a copywriting validator, and essentially it's telling my copywriting skill to make sure that it doesn't sound like AI. And so I can teach it. Like, I have an .md here, which is like an anti-AI voice. The way that I did it is I just fed this Wikipedia of like, this is what AI voice sound like in Wikipedia. I give it to Claude, and once Claude got that link, it uses that as an anti-prompt. And so now we have all these things here saying that does this sound like AI? And so the thing is, as you can see, the references I put here are not what you call scripts, but rather just plain text. It's as if you're writing in Notion. A .md file only means markdown, which means it's inside of Notion or Google Docs. And so you could edit this directly and understand what you're trying to prompt with AI. And so before, when we were trying to do in ChatGPT, you might heard of the term prompt engineering, right? And so you have to have this big text of prompt in order to get the result that you have. But now the thing is, Claude has a brain, and what you have to engineer now is context of what it has in its memory, and then give it a prompt so that it already acts as if it has a skill. Like, you don't have to give it a step-by-step process on how to open this software, you could just give it a skill that it will use anytime it makes sense. So the only thing you have to do is open this, and it's essentially like you've created a training for an employee wherein like he understands how to use meta ads or understand how to use Google Sheets. You don't have to tell it again and again. And so what makes it good is that this is the leverage. Once you start teaching it with the skills that you've learned from the other day, I was teaching it how to do copywriting with the courses that I've learned. Instead of trying me feeding it with how I write copy, is I fed it with the courses that I've already took. And so it created a skill for copywriting. And so that's how it works. And once you're inside of your IDE, and it doesn't have to be IDE, it could just be a basic terminal. And so if you open your terminal, this is how you would open Claude Code. And I'll show you later on in another video how to install Claude Code. Essentially, I had mine create like this. You could just put Claude, and it will initialize. And once you are inside of Claude, you could start talking to it. And so I can start talking to it through, hey, Claude, are you now okay? Because I realized I hit my rate limit for the whole week. Am I still blocked? So yeah, I hit my limit, so I won't be able to show you right now. Maybe another video. I was doing a lot of stuff. I'll be upgrading into max probably in the next coming days because I really miss Claude. I've been banned for like 2 days now or something. I'd get this tomorrow at 4 p.m. But the point is, inside of your IDE, you could be checking on what Claude is thinking and what has it had in its memory. And then you could initialize, excuse me, you could initialize Claude here inside of your IDE as well. You could create parallel Claudes here. So if you have Claude running here already, you could have another Claude here. And so don't be overwhelmed when I say this and it looks highly technical as if I'm coding. What you're doing here is essentially just managing files. And so what I mean by that is that I could be having Finder, right? And okay, so what's happening really is just I'm managing my files inside of VS Code. And so these are files right here as if it's just Finder, right? And what's happening is just essentially I'm just running a terminal, right? And this terminal right here, okay. So this terminal right here, I'm just controlling. Finder is essentially on the left side. Oh, sorry. Finder is on the left side right here, and then I have my terminal working right over here, just like what it is on what you saw on VS Code. It's just the same thing, and then you can see a preview here. It's just a way to see the UI and whatever you're doing. And so, for example, here, I could not edit my MD very easily because it's in that form, right? But if I use it in the IDE, it's the same setup. You have what you're seeing here, and you have your terminal here. If I click on writing guidelines, which is what we could see, if I double click, I can edit it easily. And so that's how it is to work in an IDE. And it's one of the best ways to work and work within Claude. And so, for example, to make it easy so that you understand it and you don't get overwhelmed, is that you could open anti-gravity. VS Code or anti-gravity, which one works for you. And let's just go on a fresh project, right? And so I'll go and create a new window. So this is what happens, and you start with a new window. So you have anti-gravity here, right? And you could open a folder, and then we're just gonna go for project fresh, right? Just to start with the very start. And earlier I was doing some examples here, and so we have hello.txt, right? So we have project fresh. Let's start another file here, which is just adding a new file. Let's say hi.txt. Okay, so you have hi.txt that has hello. It works. Right, and so I can save that, and now we have hi.txt inside of our project. And so essentially, again, this is the folder view, this is just the preview, and then under that, we have our terminal. And that would be, if you have a normal terminal, this is how it looks like, right? And so now we want to check if we actually made the file inside of this VS Code with hi.txt. And so if we search here with raycast hi.txt, and we find that in our Finder. As you can see in Project Fresh, we have hi.txt, and if we open it, hello, it works. And so essentially, is this just a way for me to view the things that I have in Claude, which is, let's open our window again. So file, open recent, which is .claude. right here. This is just me trying to access the files, editing it, and then working with Claude inside of the terminal. So that's pretty much it. We've gotten into the depths of what AI agentic or Claude Code is, and in the next coming tutorials we will be diving in how to actually set it up, because we've got into the theoretical so that later on when we're trying to explain how these things work or what terms we're using, you are in the loop of what's going to be happening in context of what we're showing into you. And so it's a good way that you actually start with the foundations before diving into the technical. I hope that as a person who's a creative or just someone who's trying to double their work leverage or their productivity, I hope you could use this tool as much as possible, because this is where things are heading, and it's crazy where things are at right now because people are just getting so much done, and execution is essentially just becoming easier and easier now. We can be thinking of this app that we want to build in the next coming days. We already have it. And so there is no limit to your imagination. If you don't know how to do it technically, you could literally ask Claude on how to do it. Like, for example, on the Apple Notes example, I would have had to learn how to use AppleScript and all these languages for me to have programmed a connection from Claude to Apple Notes. But I just told it, hey, do you have access to my Apple Notes? And he's like, no, I don't. But let me find a way to connect through AppleScript. And it did. It programmed itself. It programmed its own brain, and it just worked. And so that's how it is. And so in the next tutorials, I will show you how to actually set up Claude Code with a fresh computer. Probably not my machine because I installed already in my machine. So we're going to be using a fresh machine later on, probably from my girlfriend. And we're going to be using her to install the Claude Code in her laptop. Using her laptop, and from there I will show you how it works and put it into action. So thank you so much for watching this video, and from understanding as you're already way ahead. The easiest part is the execution. The hardest part there is the confusion, right? It's hard to take action if you're confused. And so clarifying all the theories from the very start is what will get you started into this AI game, AI race we are in right now. So thanks so much for watching. I hope you liked this video. I hope you learned a lot. Click on the subscribe button if you want to learn more stuff like this. I just really want to share more value regarding this. I taught this to my team earlier, and I was just thinking, why not record for everyone who are non-technical to understand this? So if you have any questions, comment it down below, and I will see you guys next time.